Digital entertainment is changing the way we read literature. If you've ever felt bored by Shakespeare, the problem might not be you. In the age of short-form entertainment and instant gratification, Shakespeare can feel like a dead language, and our visual consumption is training us to be passive absorbers of content. But in this video, I want to consider the roots of drama from ancient Greece and to talk about why that actually changes how we should read the plays in the 21st century. It's the difference really between active and passive reading. People often read Shakespeare like a textbook. They open it, stare at the words, get overwhelmed by the language, maybe Google some summaries, and then hope to understand what it means that way. But you can't distill literature into useful factoids or conversation pieces. And perhaps this really isn't our fault. For the past 200 years, Shakespeare's work has suffered from extreme exposure. Everybody knows of Shakespeare. Everybody feels as though they should read Shakespeare. But Shakespeare was not written to be read like a textbook. Shakespeare is not even meant to be read as a novel. So if you're used to reading novels, you're going to have to adopt a new way of reading for drama. Even though his plays are written largely in verse, you shouldn't read the play like a poem. In the deepest sense, a Shakespeare play is not even a text. A Shakespeare play is a ritualized experience that invites full moral, emotional, and imaginative participation, and most modern readers miss this completely. Really, it's the difference between studying the fossil of a fern and walking through a lush understory of bracken on a cool spring morning. One is the study of the static idea, the other is to encounter the thing. One is abstract, and the other is experiential. Both forms of study are valid, but you need the experience before you study it abstractly. But what I want to talk about is why this is the case with Shakespeare. The thing to mention is that we are living through a rapid development of technological entertainment. We are living through one of the greatest transformations of public literacy. Growing up with a screen full of dopamine-addicting colors and sounds in front of your face is going to change the way we read Shakespeare and any other kind of literature. Reading is changing. And so the first thing to acknowledge is that there is a difference between the digital experience and the reading experience, and this may seem obvious. But many readers risk approaching Shakespeare as digital age consumers of entertainment or information. We want the product of experience without the inconvenience of undergoing the experience itself. We want the end result without the work. We want to be entertained, to be convinced without engaging our rational faculties. And that's what happens with digital consumption. And it's happening now with the way we read. Samuel Taylor Coleridge, right in the 19th century, once thought that novels were dangerous because they encouraged passive reading. He argued that habitually reading novels for mere entertainment, seeking pleasure without any exertion of thought through the mere excitement of curiosity and sensibility, could hinder the development of cognitive capacity. And I kind of wonder I can't help but imagine what he would say about our own age with just the consumption of digital material. A lot of readers will treat Shakespeare with the same passive consumption that we expect from Reels and TikToks. We want immediate intelligibility and are frustrated when literature doesn't immediately yield it. We want instant clarity without effort. But Shakespeare's theater was not built for passive consumption. More than any other form of literature, drama intends to be an encounter. It required an imaginative engagement and, if successful, produced a transformation. You leave the playhouse different from when you arrived. And if it's good literature, you leave better than you arrived. You leave a better person than when you first picked up the novel or the poem or the play. In our present times, we are in the danger of flattening Shakespeare's work into plot points and bullet lists and summaries when it was never meant to be understood in that way. It was meant to happen to you. This goes back to the ancient origins of drama. Literature is about formation, and the play should be read as a structured, patterned event, not a document. All of Shakespeare's plays are about transformation, every single one of them, especially about balance. And once you notice that, it becomes a key to the texts in a way. If the play tends toward imbalance, it is a tragedy. There's too much of something in the play or in the character, either ambition, lust, anger, jealousy, and that imbalance leads to tragedy. The result of the rebalancing is the comedy, the resolution of some threatening excess that finally results in a harmonization. So just like natural ecological systems, Shakespeare's plays involve a homeostasis, a psychological homeostasis. And when we begin to read a Shakespeare play, we bring to the experience our own psychological imbalances, our own inner psychic equilibriums. They undergo a rebalancing too. And the participatory act of imaginative engagement helps to harmonize the inner discordance. This is why it's so different from watching content on your phone or on YouTube, and this is partly the significance behind Aristotle's theory of catharsis. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, he studied under Plato, gave us one of the most significant documents of literary criticism in his Poetics. Aristotle's theory of tragedy was something that helped harmonize or reharmonize the psychic equilibrium of those who were watching it. You undergo a kind of purgation. Catharsis is the experience by which tragic drama brings the audience face to face with the most difficult emotions, along with pity for others' suffering, fear of one's own vulnerability, and the play, the tragedy, guides them towards moral clarity and emotional balance. And Shakespeare draws us into the moral, emotional, intellectual exercise of ancient drama. His language itself trains attention, memory, imagination, judgment, faculties that are dulled, I think, by most forms of digital media. But where did drama come from? And here's the key to all this. The answer goes back to the ancient roots of drama as ritual. Some of the Cambridge ritualists of the early 20th century were good on this. And if you're interested, check out Gilbert Murray's book, The Rise of the Greek Epic, published in 1907, Jane Ellen Harrison's Thamus, a study of the social origins of Greek religion, published in 1912, or the great classicist A.W. Picard Cambridge's book, The Dramatic Festivals of Athens, published in 1953. These critics have shown that early Greek religion centered on pre-Olympian fertility and sacrificial rituals, that the plays gradually evolved into the formal structures of Greek drama. They began as rituals, then they became these forms of ritual entertainment. And that's exactly what the drama is doing here. The main idea is that ritual belongs to a class of human actions which answer to the most permanent condition of our existence, which is the need to orient ourselves before powers greater than we are. Dramatic literature does not arise as modern habits of thought would expect from superstition. It doesn't come from that. And it's not a mere social custom either. It's also something greater than entertainment. It comes from the desire to enact in visible and repeated form the invisible order which sustains the world. Once you see that, you read Shakespeare differently and you experience him very differently. This is why some of the Puritans in the 15th and 16th centuries did not like theater. Because even though they probably were not aware of the ritual roots of drama, they could feel it. And they could feel that it had a very powerful impact upon the imagination. Because in ritual, the motions of the body and the patterns of song conspire to bring the human creature into alignment with the higher reality on which life depends. That's why so many of the comedies are reenactments of the seasons, of the return of spring and summer. Without such actions, the moral world dissolves into contingency and chaos. The community, the audience, rehearses again and again the essential truths of its place in the cosmos and its obligations to the divine and its care for the fragile bond that unites one generation to another and humans of their own age, human beings of their own age to one another. And this form of entertainment, I suppose you can call it, although it's more than just entertainment, is not passive consumption. And this is why, for the ancient Greeks, ritual was not an ornament that was just something fancy or something to help dispel boredom, help us endure life. It was also the representation of life itself unfolding in the highest form. The festivals, the sacrifices, the choruses sung, these were not interruptions of civic life, a way to escape. It's really the deepest expression of that life. It was through these actions that the polis knew itself. And I think it's also through the actions of our own entertainment that we, as a political body, know ourselves as well, which is kind of a scary thought if you consider what we're giving our attention to ritually. because there are rituals alive today, and TikTok is one of them. Among these manifold rites, the worship of Dionysius, back in the ancient times, occupied a particular and generative place. Dionysius was the god of ecstasy, the god of wine, of shattering and rebuilding order that presided over the very forces that blur the line between man and God, and the lines between restraint and excess in self and other. And it was Dionysius, it was to Dionysius that Athens dedicated its great spring festival, the city Dionysia. And it was in this context that drama as we know it was born. Here, back then, the assembled citizens encountered entertainment, but they also stood before the reenactments of myth, retellings of old, those terrible stories whose weight had not yet been lifted from human consciousness. The early dithyrambic choruses that sang of Dionysius' suffering and joy gradually gave way to the structured form of tragedy, but the ritual pulse remained. I think comedy, too, to some extent. In the hands of Sophocles and Euripides, tragedy became a public meditation upon the mystery of suffering and the limits of human reason before the inscrutable designs of fate and the gods, or the higher powers. Spectators basically participated in what I would call a civic liturgy. It was, in a way, very much like the Catholic Mass, which is why the Protestant Puritans, some of them, were very suspicious of the stage because it had this very religious power, this religious hold on people. So although we have largely forgotten the ritual origins of drama, it remains a clue to the power of Shakespeare, because drama arises wherever human beings are called to face together those things which cannot be fully resolved by argument or analysis. Things like suffering, guilt, love, forgiveness, morality, and grace. And when we come to Shakespeare, we are not departing from this inheritance. We're not escaping life, but we're rather entering one of its most intricate elaborations. The Elizabethan stage, too, was a place of encounter where the deepest movements of the soul are played out before us for our own participation. So take, for example, Shakespeare's great comedies and tragedies. One of his greatest comedies is A Midsummer Night's Dream, which seems to stand far from ritual. It's light, it's playful, we might even say it's chaotic in its manic energy and action. It's a comedy of lovers and of fairies, of mistaken identities and improbable reconciliations. But the old ritual patterns are still at work in the play. The play stages in comic form of movement through disorder into restored harmony. It's a ritual structure as old as human celebration. The opening lines present a world on the brink of imbalance. There's the law of Athens, which is represented by Theseus, who confronts the unruly desires of young lovers who refuse the imposed order. And it's this tension which they bring to the forest. And the forest opens up as this liminal space, which Northrop Frye called the green world, wherein the boundaries between waking and dreaming, between mortal and supernatural, are ever shifting. And here the characters enter what one might call a kind of symbolic madness, governed by forces they do not understand. The interventions of the Fairy King and Puck, like the daemonic agents of older religious dramas, bring the lovers through a night of enchantment and trial. They emerge transformed, and the conflicts are resolved not by rational decree or by law, as Theseus would have it, but by this ritual passage through the unknown. The festival of marriage that closes the play functions as this communal rite of renewal that reestablishes the social order with laughter and even grace. They're able to endure a really bad play by Bottom and his company and to have fun with it. And that's part of the resolution, and partly the unlikely resolution as well. And in this sense, A Midsummer Night's Dream enacts, in comic key, one of the oldest ritual structures. The descent into disorder, or into the underworld, which the forest represents, place of liminality, and then a return upward through reintegration. And the audience members, like the lovers, undergo a process of restoration. Even as they delight in the comedy, they participate in the drama's larger work of restoring harmony to both the private and public worlds, because that's what's on display in A Midsummer Night's Dream. That's comedy. Turn to one of his greatest tragedies, King Lear. Tragedy does not promise reintegration without cost. The losses are real and the deaths are irreversible. And in King Lear, ritual doesn't announce itself with this festival like we have in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Even in the title there, we have the Festival of Midsummer and the May rites. But instead, in Lear, we have the gravity of sacrifice. His opening abdication of power and his division of the kingdom is a perversion of order. It is the separating instead of reintegrating. It begins with this visceral tear of a map. And what ought to be an act of generational transfer instead inaugurates the play's descent into chaos. Lear mistakes ritual form for personal flattery, and he fails to perceive the deeper moral weight of the ceremony of tearing the kingdom or marking the bounds. His error tears apart the fabric of the kingdom, where the literal is enacted in the following acts, which plunges not only himself but his entire world into a kind of undoing and unmaking. As the play unfolds, Lear's journey mirrors the ancient patterns of suffering and initiation. He's driven out into the storm. Stripped of his worldly dignity, he undergoes a symbolic death, a dissolution of identity and pride. The heath on which he stands becomes a wilderness, his own liminal space. And here, like the initiates of old rites, he confronts the naked condition of man. Unaccommodated man is no more but such a poor, bare, forked animal. Lear's madness is not senility. A lot of people read this play as kind of symbolic of or an allegory of the descent into old age, and old age is a key theme here. It's very important to the play, but it's not that Lear becomes senile. It's really everyone's passage through extremity, a dark parody of the ritual transformation, or rather an inverse of the comic transformation. Yet even in its bleakness, King Lear preserves the ancient function of tragedy, and it leads the audience through pity and fear into a catharsis. Through fear and through pity, there's this purification of the vision. And for the audience, as for Lear, the play becomes a moral ordeal. Through enduring this vision, we too undergo a form of ritual participation, and we emerge with a deepened sense of awareness for the human condition, really the fragility and the vulnerability of our condition as human beings. The play does not offer us easy comfort, but it does grant the dignity of having faced alongside its characters the ultimate questions that ritual has always sought to address. And they're the same questions that are gonna come at you in life whether you think of them beforehand or not. And when you attend or read a Shakespeare play, you're entering a ritual space. You're not a passive consumer of entertainment. You're joining an ancient form of moral and imaginative exercise. In ritual, the audience is there to undergo the process of catharsis, moral reflection, and to participate in this collective memory. Shakespeare inherits this tradition. Every play is structured to draw the audience into active engagement. And if you don't give it what it invites you to give, which is that imaginative, active engagement, the play is going to fall flat, and you'll be very frustrated with it. And this is what all great literature does for us, if read well. It dilates our moral capacity. It enriches our enjoyment of life. It sharpens our attention. It enlarges our ability to communicate, solve problems, celebrate, lament communally, and to imagine a more just society. So if you're interested in taking with me a course on my platform Versed, you can still sign up. After the course is complete, all of my lectures and study guides will remain available on my platform Versed community. So check out the link below on how to join. Thanks for watching, and until next time.